An old man applies for a job as a woodcutter, but the boss is skeptical. "You don't look strong enough to handle the big trees," the boss says. The old man confidently replies, "I can cut down any tree with a single swing." To prove it, he steps outside, takes his axe to a 5-foot tree, and with one swing, it crashes down. Then he does the same with a 10-foot tree, a 30-foot tree, and finally an 80-foot redwood. Each tree falls with a single strike. Amazed, the boss asks, "Where did you learn to cut like that?" The old man replies, "In the Sahara forest." The boss looks confused. "Don't you mean the Sahara Desert?" The old man nods and says, "Well, that's what they call it now." An old retired sailor puts on his old uniform and goes down to the docks once more for old time's sake. He hires a prostitute and takes her up to a room. He's going at it as best as he can for a guy his age when he asks, "How am I doing?" The prostitute replies, "Well, sailor, you're doing about 3 knots." "3 knots?" He replies, "What's that supposed to mean?" She says, "You're not hard, you're not in, and you're not getting your money back." A police officer attempts to stop a car for speeding, and the guy gradually increases his speed until he's topping 100 miles per hour. He eventually realizes he can't escape and finally pulls over. The cop approaches the car and says, "It's been a long day, and my tour is almost over, so if you can give me a good excuse for your behavior, I'll let you go." The guy thinks for a few seconds and then says, "My wife ran away with a cop about a week ago. I thought you might be that officer trying to give her back." 3 women, 2 younger, and 1 senior citizen were sitting in a sauna only covered by a towel. Suddenly, there was a beeping sound. The young woman pressed her forearm and the beep stopped. The others looked at her questioningly. "That was my pager," she said. "I have a microchip under the skin of my arm." A few minutes later, a phone rang. The second young woman lifted her palm to her ear. When she finished, she explained, "That was my mobile phone. I have a microchip in my hand." The older woman felt very low-tech. Not to be outdone, she decided she had to do something just as impressive. She stepped out of the sauna and went to the bathroom. She returned with a piece of toilet paper hanging from her rear end. The others raised their eyebrows and stared at her. The older woman finally said, "Well, will you look at that? I'm getting a fax." A man comes back from the doctor and tells his wife that he's been given only 24 hours to live. Feeling the weight of the news, he asks his wife, "Honey, can we spend some of that time together? You know, intimately?" Naturally, she agrees, and they share a passionate moment. About 6 hours later, the man glances at the clock and realizes time is slipping away. "Honey," he asks again, "I only have 18 hours left. Could we maybe one more time?" She smiles warmly and agrees. Later that night, as they settle into bed, the man tosses and turns, unable to sleep. Looking at the clock, he sees he only has 4 hours left. Gently tapping his wife, he whispers, "Honey, it's my last few hours. Do you think we could, just one last time?" His wife sits up groggy and says, "Look, I have to get up in the morning, you don't." A mother-in-law stopped by the recently married couple's house unexpectedly. She rang the doorbell and stepped inside, where she saw her daughter-in-law standing without clothes by the door. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm waiting for my husband to come home from work," the daughter-in-law answered. "But you're without clothes," the mother-in-law exclaimed. "This is my love dress," the daughter-in-law explained. Love dress? But you're without clothes. My husband loves me to wear this dress. It makes him happy, and it makes me happy. I would appreciate it if you would leave because he will be home from work any minute. The mother-in-law, tired of all this romantic talk, left. On the way home, she thought about the love dress. When she got home, she got undressed, showered, put on her best perfume and waited by the front door. Finally, her husband got home. He walked in and saw her standing without clothes by the door. "What are you doing?" he exclaimed. "This is my love dress," she replied. "Needs ironing," he said. After their barn burned down, Bob's wife, Sally, called their insurance agent to file a claim for the $60,000 the barn was insured for. The agent calmly explained, "Now, hold on, that's not how it works. First, we'll send out an adjuster to evaluate the damage. Then, we'll provide you with a replacement barn, identical to the original." There was a long silence on the line before Sally finally responded. "Well, if that's how it works, cancel the life insurance on my husband immediately." A woman was waiting to board a bus when she realized her skirt was too tight to lift her leg high enough to step onto the first step. Feeling a bit self-conscious, she smiled at the bus driver and reached behind to unzip her skirt slightly, hoping to create enough slack to step up. However, her first attempt failed. With another polite smile, she tried unzipping her skirt a little more, but still, she couldn't manage the step. Frustrated yet determined, she gave it one last try, unzipping her skirt even further in hopes of finally getting on the bus. At this point, a large Texan man standing behind her gently picked her up by the waist and placed her on the first step of the bus. Shocked and outraged, the woman spun around and yelled, "How dare you touch me? I don't even know who you are." The Texan, unfazed, tipped his hat with a grin and drawled, "Well, ma'am, normally I'd agree with you, but after you unzipped my fly 3 times, I figured we must be friends." For years, an old French lady ran a small shop in her village. Life was peaceful until a massive corporate supermarket opened right across the street. The supermarket wasted no time putting up bold advertisements, including one that boasted "Butter €10." Not one to back down, the old lady quickly placed her own sign in the shop window. Butter, €9. The next day, the supermarket countered with a new sign, butter €8. Undeterred, the old lady updated her sign again, butter €7. This price war continued for several days, with each lowering their price further. Eventually, a concerned customer approached the old lady and pointed at her sign. "Madame," he said, "you cannot keep dropping your prices like this. Those big supermarkets can afford it, but a small shop like yours? You'll go out of business." The old lady leaned in close, a mischievous glint in her eye, and whispered, "Monsieur, I don't even sell butter." Margaret was 79 years old and lived on the 3rd floor of a boarding house. Despite her age, she was full of spunk and had a mischievous streak. One day, however, she took a tumble and broke her leg. An ambulance whisked her to the hospital, where the doctor carefully set her leg in a cast. After finishing, he cautioned her, "Now, no climbing stairs for a while, all right?" Margaret nodded, agreeing it was a sensible restriction. A few weeks later, when the cast was finally removed, she eagerly asked the doctor, "So, can I climb stairs now?" "Yes, you're good to go," he replied. "Thank goodness," Margaret exclaimed. "I was getting pretty tired of shimmying up and down that drain pipe." An 82-year-old man, fresh from a visit to the doctor, had just received devastating news. He didn't have much time left. Determined to prepare for the inevitable, he called together the three most important people in his life: his doctor, his priest, and his lawyer. "I've just learned my time is short," he said solemnly. "Each of you means the world to me, and I need to ask a favor. I'm giving you each an envelope with $50,000. When I'm gone, I'd like you to honor my memory by throwing the money into my grave." The three agreed to his unusual request, and the man passed away soon after. A few days later, the three gathered to discuss what they had done. The doctor went first. "I have a confession. I kept $10,000 to cover some unpaid medical bills, but I threw the remaining $40,000 into the grave as he wished." The priest followed. "I must admit, I kept $25,000 for the church's renovations, but I did put $25,000 into the grave." The lawyer looked at them in disbelief. "I'm shocked at both of you. I'll have you know I honored his request to the letter. I wrote a check for the full $50,000 and threw it in." One day, my husband and I decided to grab a quick bite at McDonald's. After placing our order, I handed the cashier a $5 bill to pay our $4.25 total. To make her life easier, I added 25 cents so she could give me $1 back. Simple math, right? Wrong. The cashier stared at me like I just asked her to solve a quantum physics equation. Flustered, she called the manager for help. After a quick explanation, they handed back my 25 cents and then, to my surprise, gave me 75 cents in change. After servicing our car at the dealership, we were told the keys had accidentally been locked inside. A mechanic worked furiously to unlock the driver's side door, while I casually tried the passenger side handle. To my delight, it was unlocked. "Hey, it's open!" I exclaimed. Without missing a beat, the mechanic replied, "I know. I already did that side." Cue awkward silence and mutual head-scratching. My daughter decided to indulge in some Mexican fast food and ordered a taco. Wanting to customize her order, she politely asked for minimal lettuce. The cashier paused, then replied earnestly, "I'm sorry, we only have iceberg lettuce." Not exactly what she meant by minimal. The misunderstanding turned her simple request into a comedic miscommunication. Three very different couples want to get married at the same church. There is a very young couple, a middle-aged couple, and an elderly couple of over 70. All three couples meet with the priest of the church to discuss when and how they can get married. "In order to get married in my church, I have one rule. You really have to go 1 month without making love," says the priest to the couples. After 1 month, all three couples return to the church to talk with the priest again. The priest starts with the young couple and asks them, "Did you make love in the last month after you came here first?" "No, we haven't, and it was very easy to our own surprise," replies the young couple. He then turned to the middle-aged couple. "How about you?" he asked the couple. "It was really hard, Father, but we didn't make love for the whole month," replies the middle-aged couple. "And how about the two of you?" He then asked the elderly couple. "I'm really sorry, Father, but we just couldn't make it till the end," responds the old man. "Not?" "Then please tell me why not," says the priest. "Well, Father, my woman had a can of soup in her hand when she accidentally dropped it on the floor, and when she bent over to pick it up again, well, that's when it happened, Father." The priest, still a bit in shock, then tells them, "I'm sorry, but in that case, you're not welcome in my church to get married. We're also not welcome in the supermarket anymore either," says the old man. A wealthy old man was lying on his deathbed when it occurred to him that he had never made a will. So he called his lawyer to help him draft one. The next day, the lawyer arrived, and the old man said, "I want 25% of my money to go to charity. After all, I've taken so much, I should give something back." "How generous of you," the lawyer replied. "I'll make sure that happens right away. I also want 25% to go to my son. He's been waiting for the day he could get his hands on my money," the old man added. "Okay, I'll make sure he gets 25%, the lawyer responded. "And the rest should go to my wife, on the condition that she remarries after I die," the old man said. The lawyer, a bit puzzled, asked, "Okay, I'll make sure that happens. But may I ask why you want her to remarry? It's a rather unusual request." The old man grinned and said, "I want to make sure at least one man regrets my death." A farmer was sitting at the local bar, nursing a drink and looking glum. A curious man walked in, saw him, and asked, "Why are you sitting here drinking on such a nice day?" The farmer sighed and shook his head. "Some things you just can't explain." Intrigued, the man sat down next to him. "Come on, what happened? It can't be that bad." The farmer took a sip of his drink and said, "Well, this morning I was milking my cow. Just as I filled the bucket, she lifted her left leg and knocked it over." The man chuckled. "That's annoying, but it's not the end of the world." The farmer sighed again. "Some things you just can't explain." "So what did you do next?" the man asked. "I tied her left leg to a post," the farmer replied. "Smart," said the man. "What happened after that?" "Well, I sat back down to milk her again. Just as the bucket got full, she kicked it over with her right leg." The man laughed. "This cow really has it out for you." "Some things you just can't explain," the farmer repeated. "What did you do then?" "I tied her right leg to a post too," said the farmer. "And then?" The farmer continued. "I sat back down to milk her again, and just when the bucket was full, she swatted it over with her tail." The man nodded, suppressing a grin. "Wow, she's persistent. So what did you do?" "Well," the farmer said, "I didn't have any more rope, so I took off my belt and tied her tail to the rafter. But as I was tying it, my pants fell down, and that's when my wife walked in." The farmer shook his head and sighed. "Some things you just can't explain." Just found my wife's diary from when we were first married. Monday. It's fun to cook for Bob. Today, I made angel food cake. The recipe said beat 12 eggs separately. The neighbors were nice enough to loan me some extra bowls. Tuesday. Bob wanted fruit salad for supper. The recipe said serve without dressing. So I didn't dress. What a surprise when Bob brought a friend home for supper. Wednesday, a good day for rice. The recipe said, wash thoroughly before steaming the rice. It seemed kind of silly, but I took a bath. I can't say it improved the rice any. Thursday. Today Bob asked for salad again. I tried a new recipe. It said, prepare ingredients, then toss on a bed of lettuce 1 hour before serving. Which is what led up to Bob asking me why I was rolling around in the garden. Friday, I found an easy recipe for cookies. It said, put all ingredients in bowl and beat it. There must have been something wrong with this recipe. When I got back, everything was the same as when I left. Saturday, Bob did the shopping today and brought home a chicken. He asked me to dress it for Sunday. Oh boy. For some reason, Bob keeps counting to 10. Sunday, Bob's folks came to dinner. I wanted to serve roast. All I could find was hamburger. Suddenly, I had a flash of genius. I put the hamburger in the oven and set the controls for roast. It still came out hamburger, much to my disappointment. Good night, dear diary. This has been a very exciting week. I am eager for tomorrow to come so I can try out a new recipe on Bob. If we could just get a bigger oven, I would like to surprise him with chocolate mousse. Meet Fred and Martha. Fred is interested in Martha, and soon enough, they're dating. They enjoy each other's company, and before long, they decide to become exclusive. One evening, while driving home, Martha suddenly realizes it's been exactly 6 months since they started seeing each other. Martha turns to Fred and says, "Did you know tonight marks exactly 6 months since we started dating?" Silence. To Martha, the silence feels heavy. Is he upset? Does he feel trapped? Does he think she's pressuring him? Fred, on the other hand, is thinking, wow, 6 months already. Meanwhile, Martha's mind begins to race. What if I'm not ready for commitment? Am I thinking about marriage, kids? Is he? Fred is still focused elsewhere. I should probably get an oil change soon. Martha is now worried, interpreting his silence as a sign of discontent. Maybe he's upset with me, or he's thinking about commitment. Maybe he can sense I'm unsure. Fred is still pondering his car. I need to get the transmission checked. It's been acting up. And it's not the weather. It's 87 degrees outside. Martha feels guilty. I've put him through so much, and I'm still undecided about my feelings. Maybe I'm setting my expectations too high. Fred's thoughts haven't left the car. They'll probably tell me the warranty's expired. Typical. Martha is near tears. I know there's no perfect guy, no knight in shining armor. I'm being foolish, but I want something special. Fred finally speaks. Martha. What? Martha's voice trembles. Fred is perplexed. I didn't know you liked horses so much. Martha, confused. What? I mean, you mentioned knights. Fred replies, clearly lost. Martha sighs, her emotions bubbling over. I know it's silly to dream about fairy tales, but I just... Fred, relieved he seems to be back on solid ground, says, No, it's not silly. Martha, touched, reaches for his hand. Fred, do you really mean that? Fred nods, hoping he said the right thing. Yes. Martha leans in with hope, and Fred can feel the conversation nearing a dangerous topic, especially if it involves more horses. Finally, she whispers, Thank you, Fred. Fred, unsure but pleased with how things seem to be turning out, replies, Thank you. That night, Martha lies in bed, processing everything, tears slipping down her cheeks. Meanwhile, Fred grabs a bag of Doritos and watches a rerun of a basketball game he barely remembers. There's a faint feeling that something significant happened, but he's sure he'll never figure it out and decides to ignore it. The next day, Martha discusses the night with friends, analysing every moment with careful precision, but never quite reaching a conclusion. Fred, on the other hand, while playing racquetball with a friend, pauses and asks, Hey Norm, did Martha ever own a horse? And that, folks, is the difference between men and women. A little boy is being very bad on the plane until an old man whispers in his ear. As the crowded airliner prepared for takeoff, the calm was shattered by the wild tantrum of a 5-year-old boy. His frustrated, embarrassed mother tried everything to soothe him, but the boy only screamed louder and kicked the seats around him, much to the dismay of the nearby passengers. Suddenly, from the back of the plane, an elderly man dressed in the uniform of an Air Force general slowly walked up the aisle. With a soft, reassuring hand gesture, he stopped the frazzled mother and bent down to whisper something into the boy's ear, motioning towards the decorations on his chest. Almost immediately, the boy stopped crying, gently took his mother's hand, and quietly fastened his seatbelt. The entire plane erupted into spontaneous applause. As the general made his way back to his seat, one of the flight attendants, curious and impressed, approached him. "Excuse me, General," she asked, "but what did you say to that little boy?" The general smiled gently and said, "I showed him my pilot's wings, service stars, and battle ribbons. And I told him they gave me the authority to throw one passenger out of the plane on any flight I choose.